Welcome back again to Time Barbarian. I've been working on the project off camera. The editing of these videos takes a lot longer and really slowing me down, so wanted to get into a little bit of a groove here. So I knocked out quite a few things. Let me try to hit the highlights for you. First off, we have a store screen. This is a separate scene that I have created here. It is based thematically and using the graphics from the original game, but I've rearranged it and simplified. For now, I just have these 3 items available in the store. I do plan to add more probably before I even release, and I don't know that 3 items in the store is viable, but at least it demonstrates all of the necessary capabilities that I'm going to need to move forward, and I think there are several items that I can knock in very quickly, so we'll get those in. Let's take a quick tour. When you select an item, it'll tell you what the item does. I'll have a little image here. If you don't own it yet, you'll have the option to buy it. If you don't have enough currency when you try to buy, you'll come to here. You can also just click straight on there. I didn't add a close box or anything. I just let you tap anywhere outside. We're going to see how that flies. I created this Bolognium time crystals, which are going to be the intermediate between cash and the items that you purchase. And you know, I could just let you purchase these straight for money, but I want to give other ways for people to earn these besides only cash. So like watching ads and so forth, I'll be able to award these things. And so the intermediate of the time crystal creates that. So you can either just buy time crystals for cash, let's just buy one, or you can earn them in other ways, and then once you have them, you can then purchase one of these items. Let's go ahead and just purchase everything. Let's see these things in the game. I have the missiles that I've added, and if I power up, I'll get the, here we go, a couple more, one more egg. There we go. We get the egg shield and the powered up laser that does double damage. Let's see that missile in action. We've got the aiming cursors that tell you when you've got guys in range. And boom. So we don't have any particles on that yet. The other thing we have here is an options menu. And I did think that was slightly interesting. So let me take you through the setup for the options menu. First of all, we hear the music playing, and this slider is tied to the volume of the music. One thing that I have to nag students from time to time is you have to let me hear the music while I'm adjusting the volume. So either leave the music playing on this screen, don't pause the music, or if you do need to pause the music or want to pause the music, then when I touch it, play me a sound, play me a sample of the music while I'm adjusting so that I can get that. Meanwhile, how about the sound effects? How do I adjust the sound effects? As I slide the thing, give me a sound that I can hear. So let's look at how that's set up, because that is slightly interesting. On the main menu, I have an options, and options, you're not going to be surprised, is a prefab. The options menu itself is a separate prefab from the main menu, and main menu is a prefab that pulls in the options menu prefab. The obvious reason for that is that this options menu appears on both the in-game and the main menu. So the same thing repeated twice. That's sort of the core of why you want one of these prefabs in the first place. In keeping with the concept of really minimizing the responsibilities of any given class. So you say one class, one job, right? So this is one of the things I want to keep to, and so I've created a class just for this options, and the only thing it has on there are these two sliders and a sound that we play when the slider is being adjusted. When the user adjusts their volume setting, it needs to save that. We're going to save it somewhere. I'm going to use player preferences for this. We'll see that right here. Player preferences, I'm going to save the value of the slider in there. Now, that means that when I boot up the game, I need to immediately read from the player save, from the player preferences, that volume, and we need to adjust the slider so that on initialization, the slider is at the correct place, wherever the player left it. We'll do that on start. We will, and I've created little helper functions for that. Let's go and look. What is get SFX volume? Get SFX volume is simply just going to pull from the PlayerPrefs. Now, even though I'm simply pulling from PlayerPrefs, I do recommend you put at least one layer of wrapper on here, because you may someday go multi-platform, and some platforms still do not support player preferences. So you may want to roll your own. You may need to save those to a save file using your own code that you write that emulates how PlayerPrefs work. And so for that, it's very handy to have these little go-betweens to just do that and not constantly be referencing this directly. The sliders themselves are going to be referenced back to these functions. These are the functions that will be called when the player adjusts the slider. Each of them has something slightly interesting. The SFX volume, what I've got here is I do want to play a sound as they're adjusting the slider, and so that's interesting. And I'm doing that by just keeping track of the last time the sound was played, because I don't want it constantly playing. I set it up to only play at a particular rate, and that rate is every 0.2 seconds. So 5 times a second is the maximum I've got set for this. So as the player is adjusting that slider, you hear that shoop, 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 shoop sound. Let's look at the sound instance first, I suppose. Now, when you set the volume of your sound effects, all the sound effects need to be adjusted. And previously, I showed that the solution to that is an AudioMixer group. If you have an AudioMixer group, then you can adjust the volume of that, and everything using that group will be affected, whether it's already playing or it's a new sound that's going to be playing in the future. The volume group, though, takes its volume in terms of decibels, not in terms of 0 to 1. So you want the slider goes from 0 to 1. You have to convert that into decibels. And here's the math for that conversion. Just take your 0 to 1 range. And in fact, don't go to 0, because log of 0 is not going to be your friend. So I'm going to take from 0.30, so 0.0001 to 1.0. I will go ahead and clamp that, and then apply the log base 10, and then multiply by 20. And that gives us the scale that seems to work pretty well. And then that we will set as a float parameter on our AudioMixer, not even directly on the group, but on the AudioMixer. Let me take you now to how that is set up. Here's my AudioMixer right there, and there's the AudioMixer window. The first thing you need to do is look at your SFX options. Choose your SFX group. You need to right-click and then expose the volume. I've already done that. For example, let's expose the master. That would look like this. So here we'll expose the volume for the SFX group and also expose the volume for the music group. And then you need to come over here, and right here you'll see the exposed parameters, the parameters that you have exposed. And so far it's just those two, the SFX volume and the music volume, and it gives them silly names. So you go in here and you rename them. So you can just rename those parameters to be something meaningful for you. So music volume and SFX volume. Now, let me stress that these parameters are not attached directly to the groups. They're attached to the mixer itself. So the mixer has these two parameters, and what they drive then is the volume, the attenuation, if you will, of those two separate groups. I hope that makes some sense. You make your mixer, you make your subgroups, right? These are two groups that are children of master. When you select one, you come up here and you expose, you right click and expose the volume. It's the volume you want to control. You could expose, for example, the pitch, but I want to expose the volume. Expose them both, and then on the mixer, audio mixer window itself, we go to the expose parameters, and then you can rename them as you wish. Yeah, you may say, hey, where'd you get that audio mixer? That's a good question. We go, we'll close this, close that tab. We go window, where's audio mixer? And then that'll pop the panel for you, and you can see your mixer right there. The music volume, that one's right here. I did not make that one a static. I made that one a member, as you can see. So we do call the getter on that, whereas the SFX is a static. We can see right here, that's a static. This is not a static. So we need the instance on the music manager. We do not need the instance on the sound instance. And that's a good question. Why? Why did I do that? The reason I did that is simply because on the music manager, I made the mixer group a member variable. And that was a decision that I made, I don't know, some time ago. It is a member variable. I usually defer to member variable first and then only convert to static when needed. And we can see an example of that here in the sound effects. The sound effects is using a static function, and that means that the mixer group must be a static variable. Why is that? Well, it's because I don't have one sound instance. I have all the sound instances, but the music manager, there's only one. So it made sense at the time to make the music manager, and being there only one, contain its variables as its own members, but the sound instances, they share that same SFX group, and so it made sense to make a static. We could go back and unify them both to be static later if we wanted to. So there's sound, there's the sound, there's the options menu that shows how that works. I will take a moment to show you how the player is set up. The player, as I've shown before, is a prefab, right? The player is a prefab. It's here in the resources. There's the player prefab. Now you'll notice when you open the player prefab has other prefabs on it, and this is something I've advocated for you before. The egg shield is a separate component that I created, and I animated it and then attached it as a child. And similarly, the missile launcher. Missile launcher is a separate game object, separate hierarchy with script, custom script on it, and custom animations on it. And by doing it that way, I'm able to really delegate things, to keep my scripts small. We were discussing this in summer class a few weeks ago, and we talked about one of the main pitfalls of a student-driven project is those script files that are thousands of lines long, and they're really hard to wrangle. Things are just super coupled and just super jumbled around. So instead, delegate off. Just take like the concept of the missile launcher, make that its own script that handles things and has its own sounds associated with it, has its own animations associated with it, as opposed to just dumping that all straight into the player code. So that's it. That's where we're at. What have we got next? I noticed that the missile firing button is still on screen even when the missile functionality is not yet available. So if the player hasn't purchased missiles yet, I'm going to hide the UI element for that. And the other thing is, in the previous game, we learned early on that we really needed to emphasize the tie-in between having that full egg bar and upgrading your laser power. And so we created this whole animation of like a wave that goes through the bar to emphasize that. And I think I need to put that in. After that, we need level progression. So right now the game still just, you defeat all the enemies, it just hangs there. There's nothing else you can do. I'll need to set that up. And finally, I need to integrate some ads. So that's about it for tonight. Let me know if there's anything you want to see more details on.